Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, just a quick apology. I had a bunch of flights that got messed up yesterday by the weather, so I was supposed to have plenty of time in the morning to record for you, and instead I had to shift my flights around to get all the way here to Salem, which is where I am today, getting ready to go speak later on this morning to a group of growers here. Looking forward to it a lot, but it was a pretty rough day of travel yesterday just getting out here, so I apologize for missing yesterday. It was kind of a chaotic day. All right, getting into this forecast, here's what my plan is. We have a very active pattern that's continuing. I got to show you the next several systems coming across the country and some of the differences between the models. We now have a tropical system that we're talking about. We'll get back to that in a few moments. I'll get into the long range today, and one of the things that I'm watching very, very carefully as we go into this winter is the position of the Pacific high. And I want to talk a lot about it with relationship to the Pacific decadal oscillation, which may be a dominant driver this winter. We've given a lot of attention to La Nina. Let's look at the other kind of parts of that in the North Pacific Ocean. Okay, so real quick, just wanted to show you where October finished. This is the precipitation ranks by climate district. And if it wasn't for that one system at the end of the month leading up to Halloween that went through this part of the country, we would have been record dry in this area. But from Texas into the mid-south, parts of the eastern Corn Belt, the southeast, up the east coast, it was record dry. The northern plains did not get the moisture from that system. They're near record dry. And the southwest has yet to see good southwest flow coming off the Pacific. No subtropical jet has emerged yet. That's helped this area pick up some moisture. But if we look now at the start of November, it is one of the wettest, if not the wettest, in 132 years, stretching from here in the Panhandles through central Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and parts of Kansas. Very wet in parts of the northern plains as well. And the way that the setup has been kind of moving forward, we knew that the southeast and up the east coast was going to start off this pattern dry, but we've got some new information that could suggest better moisture getting into this extremely dry region as well. If I had to pick an area that's going to remain drier, it's going to be kind of the rain shadow of the Rockies here in Montana, getting into the Canadian Prairie, and we'll see how that's going to play out just in a few moments. So already the pattern is flipped going into this month of November. We just need to see how long it's going to last, when it might reset, and we'll try to get some of those questions answered today. All right, last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation just show us the influence of getting troughs to kind of come in and make the turn over a larger southeast ridge, which is what we've seen. And the Gulf of Mexico has been wide open, and we've been supplying a tremendous amount of moisture to this side of each of these systems, where they're dragging fronts, lifting this very humid air easily into lower atmosphere, creating a lot of clouds and precip. And as it's done that, we've seen some flooding, a lot of flooding in parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri. This is where last week we were saying, there's a chance for getting 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. Some places here have picked up a foot of rain from this. So major underestimation by the models and by me, because I did not quite see the ability of the atmosphere to do this initially when we were talking about this a week ago, because of the limited moisture that was in place. That meant all of this was coming from the Gulf. None of this was locally supplied, which is just an important thing to think through. This morning, we're still watching storms. You can see here some of the active lightning strikes from Missouri through Arkansas down to Louisiana and Texas. That's where the main frontal boundary is going through. The severe weather threat from this is ended, but this has been a rough last several days here, starting this past weekend and early this week, with just large thunderstorms hitting the southern plains. So multiple tornado reports, a lot of straight line wind damage, and we're kind of getting into that fall severe weather season. Now, in the fall season, what we have to be on the lookout for, let me just pause this early this morning as the sun's rising here, is that we get away from the typical spring setup where you can just explode convection. You don't have to have weak boundaries, they can do it, but in the fall, it's almost always lined up on very, strong frontal boundaries, strong fronts here, and we're seeing, that same kind of pattern continue. But as I click play on this again, just look at the flow coming into the northwest. We are still observing numerous strong systems coming into the northwest. We just have to count them up and figure out what the next few are going to look like. Because as you just say, all right, show me the next 15 days, the position of this Pacific high is, I think, what's setting all of this up. So before, when this Pacific high was way over here, we were getting lows to dive into the Gulf of Alaska and go to British Columbia, and we had large ridging that was hitting from the southwest toward the Great Lakes. Well, this one piece moving over, I think kind of spurred on by the changes in the MJO, have just helped this trough move. And now for even the next 15 days, we're still seeing it dip into this region with a large ridge building over the northeast. And that's giving us this flow, that southwest flow through the mid part of the United States. Now, the northeast will continue to run the risk of being drier until this ridge moves out, but the whole pattern is highly amplified with trough ridges troughs and ridges, that are quite sizable. Whenever you see such a large one here over Europe, it seems to be that the upstream pattern is a bit blocked. And as a result of that, we're not going to be able to kind of open this up and really shift it around a whole lot. Now, I will tell you this, the artificial intelligence does have a bit of a different solution than some of the other models. For example, if you look at the European, you note how it is a bit drier on the west coast than all the other models. So there's the artificial intelligence, the Ensemble. The GFS continues to put more systems into the northwest, and the GFS Ensemble still not quite as dry as some of the other models. Let me go back here. But you do take note of the systems, including one deep cutoff low that's going to be coming into this area. And what you have down here is a tropical system. And as noted in each of these model runs, they're all kind of putting the moisture from this in a different location. So we better go in there and have a look at it. Same Rafael, this particular system, we were concerned for several days about the development in this area. And then we watched over last weekend this tropical depression start to form. And this morning, it's still a tropical storm and by strength, but it is expected to become a Cat 1 hurricane, moving its way over Cuba into this section of the Gulf of Mexico. Usually the limiting factor at this point is a combination of ocean temperatures cooling off rapidly and wind shear, just too much wind shear as the jet stream rebuilds itself going into the cold season more into the United States. But there's still a lot of very warm water in this area. And we have to just understand that if this goes over parts of the loop current, we could have an intensifying system. Now remember, the cone that's on this is a cone that represents the historical track error from the National Hurricane Center. So this is not the cone of the Ensemble members that I typically show you. And there's a lot of uncertainty with this, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if we compare the European model, the UK Met, the GFS, and the CMC, these are all ensembles, and stitch them all together. This is what the forecast models are doing with this system by the time we get into the 7th and the 8th. Look at the divergence in forecast solutions here. For example, we have the GFS pulling this in toward Mobile, Alabama. We have the average of everything, leaving it out here well south of New Orleans. We have the European model, and we have the UK Met taking it here just north of the Bay of Campeche and keeping it out of major influence on the United States as a landfalling system. Now, certainly its moisture will get pulled into the southeast, which will be important to see and possibly along the Gulf Coast. But that spread is substantial in this area. And we just have to continue to monitor this throughout the rest of this week, because this is on the 9th. So we're just 4 days out and looking already at pretty sizable spread here. Now, what's going to be critical to understand, as always, is going to be the timing of upper level systems. So that's why we look at this trough ridge pattern. So let's run out the European artificial intelligence and see the timing of these events. So we have a trio of troughs right now with big ridges on either side, and here is the tropical system. As we play it forward, the AI model really maintains this larger ridge that's just here off the southeast coast. And what I was concerned about was if this trough sweeps through and this ridge pushes this system right to about here it is now, but if it pushes it here, this trough will grab it and throw it right into the southeast. But what we see in the forecast models here is that trough cuts off over the four corner states, really down here in Arizona and New Mexico. And as a result, maybe does not have the pull on this system that it could have. And that's what's going to be key, is figuring out where this is going to be by this Friday to know if it will be able to influence a northward turn, or if this will turn itself into the Bay of Campeche, or will it go into Florida. That's where the model's spread is. It's all about the interaction between this trough, the ridge that's out ahead of it. It looks weak, but there it is. And then where the tropical system is kind of pulled, in the strongest direction based upon those things. That's really where we stand and don't fully know where this is going to go. So getting beyond that, we noticed that little shortwave, sorry, I got a little jumpy there. That little shortwave leaves, and then it goes right through the midsection of the United States on Sunday. And here it is, and we'll talk about what it's going to be producing then. And then beyond this, we just continue to see troughs of low pressure forming over the western United States. When is this one? This is Monday, November the 11th. That one dives into the west, and it will likely just continue to pull its influence into the Rocky Mountains, over the Great Basin, here in the Four Corner states, and a very large ridge built out ahead of it. And you know what this sets up, right? This sets up a system, midweek next week, that's going to emerge from the southern Rockies and rip across this part of the country. It's going to be very warm on this side. We're going to open up the Gulf of Mexico. Ahead of it's a cutoff low. Following it's an open wave. I mean, this is just an active pattern. And that one's going to sweep through. And we get it here by next Thursday, and that's going to bring in behind it a shot of cold air here while another trough enters. During this whole time period, the East Coast just continues to see larger ridges developing, and that's what's sending each system in this direction. Now, the artificial intelligence, sorry, this is a bit choppy this morning, but it just continues to produce highly amplified waves over the western United States. And you can just see all the way out there to mid-November, it's got another one. And so I look at all of that, and we're going to watch this time period carefully, but we just continue to see the risks of keeping a very active pattern through the middle of the month. So there will be some wind with this, but I want to show you some model differences. This is the next 7 days according to the European model on max wind gusts. So a lot of strong winds throughout the Rockies, throughout the Mountain Valley system in the west. We do have some stronger winds expected in parts of the Midwest and Mid-South. This is where the Europeans taken the tropical system. See that? Compare it to the GFS. Much windier on the plains and through the Midwest up to the Great Lakes and Northeast. It's taking the tropical system here, bringing it into Mobile. So that's just a difference right there in the winds alone that the models are not settled on. If we look at the precipitation side of it, you kind of blur your eyes and look at all of it, and everything looks quite similar. But there are model nuances that I'm going to encourage you to go to agweather.com, just slide down here to 7-day precipitation totals, and you'll see these maps and compare them. Take a look at them, especially as the day progresses. We get new model runs in here. I'm going to look closely at the WPC forecast because it continues to show for the southern plains out of the next two lows, the one that cuts off first, then the one midweek next week, very heavy rainfall for this area. We also see more heavy rainfall in some places that have recently been hit hard, and this now moves over into parts of Mississippi, Kentucky, Tennessee. And the WPC is both stalling a front over parts of Georgia and South Carolina, and it's taking the remnants of the tropical system into that area as well. And again, that's not quite the same for all the forecast models. All right. From here, let's go ahead and take a look at the high-resolution NAM model. Let's get this reset. All right, so as we play this forward, we can see the first low moving through the Midwest, dragging its front over the Mississippi Basin. We see that the southeast, while it could have some scattered showers, you can already see the front bending around the ridge. See that? It's not pushing through. It's back. It's like almost got this back arc to it, which tells you how strong that ridge is. And as we go forward, you note that there's already snow expected here as we get into Wednesday. This will be Wednesday midday. We're looking at snow in parts of Colorado, maybe into parts of western Nebraska and in Kansas, parts of northern New Mexico as well. And as we just see this next system come out into the central United States here. Sorry, this is, again, kind of choppy this morning. Sometimes I just get slow internet in some hotels. We can see, there we go, at the very end of this. Again, go look at this on AgWeather. I'm just having some struggles here. Probably makes me think this video is going to take an hour to load too. But this is where it's got the tropical system. Now that's all forced by the GFS because that's the domain that forces this model. But middle to end of this week, multiple chances of snow here after this comes through parts of Montana into Wyoming as well. So there's a lot of cold air behind this next system late this week. Okay, let's see if we can get the high-res European to run. Hey, there we go, much better. So there's the same forecast. Look at the push of moisture from the tropical system out ahead of this, hitting parts of Georgia, North and South Carolina. When is that? That's Thursday of this week. See that front, though? Look at it just bend around that ridge. So the only reason we're getting this moisture is because it's on the northern side, and the high slides over and just pushes some of that in. But you can see the snow here. This is now going to Thursday of this week into Friday. This is when the low is cut off. The European model takes Rafael in this direction, and it just sits here and spins. This is where our heavy rain starts. So again, when is that? That's Thursday into Friday. That low moves. Remember, it just kind of slides here, and the tail end of that front touches down near where Rafael is. There's the ridge over the East Coast. And what we're going to watch is when the next system pushes into the northwest on Monday the 11th. And this is the much deeper trough that comes in. And here we are by Tuesday getting into Wednesday when that one opens up, produces some snow in the north, big frontal boundary that rolls through here, probably producing some strong winds and some severe weather. And we're going to watch this system finally penetrate into the southeast. Now look at the difference in the front. See how this one's arcing this way? This is finally a deep enough low that's going to be able to push right through the high pressure, delivering some heavy rainfall in this area, still using some of the moisture from that, from the leftovers of the tropical system down here. Pretty neat to see it all happening. Let's see if I can get the GFS to run for you too. Okay, good. We're moving here as well. Look at what the GFS does. Brings the cutoff low, But the 6C has brought the tropical system here and tries to pull it right in by the time we get into Saturday into this part of Louisiana, Mississippi, parts of Alabama, and Florida. So deep low leaves. Next one comes in. When are we? We're Sunday, so this one's pushing some moisture into the northeast. Here we go. Next system is in the west. Now look at this is also amazing. European model digs us further to the south. Bigger snows for the Sierra Nevada. This low comes out into the plains. Much more potent system by next Wednesday. Rolls right into the north, drags the front through. So there's similarities, but the GFS also keeps the systems coming into the west. And that's where I say that if we put this together and just say, let's take a look at some ensemble blends. This is over the next 10 days, the probability of getting at least an inch out of this. If we step it up to 2 inches, you'll see here these probabilities are still quite high in a few of these areas. And down here, where the potential for this tropical system's moisture to go is still not set, but some of the ensemble members are doing this and some of them are doing that. The northwest as well. If we look for the really wet areas, here is, all right, let's go to the potential for 4 inches, remembering that this does include some of last night's rain in this area. And on the drier side of it, you'll take note that it's primarily going to be the Canadian Prairie, parts of Montana, the northern plains, and the southwest. This is all kind of rain shadow. It's being cut off from good moisture. And the southwest, again, we don't have that strong flow that we can get this time of year coming in from the south and west. Okay, but I do note this. This is all the way out there 7 days from now. And if we just continue to see where this goes, let me just take this out there at about day 10. Yeah, we just continue to develop West Coast troughs. The Pacific Ridge keeps opening here. And I think that's part of the reason why some of our longer range models just keep a lot of the U.S. wetter into week 2, just active. So while the details are still yet to be kind of shaken out of this, we can look at 4 different forecast systems here and all see that they're predicting a much more active move in the weather patterns in terms of moisture getting into the mid part of November. Take note, though, that some of the models are drier into California. Some of them are drier in the southern plains. Well, in the lower Mississippi River Valley, not the southern plains, like the artificial intelligence in the GFS. The European is really opening up to a lot more moisture. You can see there in that second panel. All right, temperatures. This is our all hazards weather map this morning. So there's the flood watches and warnings that are out. Some wind issues here. Got the winter storm warnings that line up throughout the Rockies, the North Rockies, the Central Rockies, and the Southern Rockies down here. We've got freeze warnings out for parts of the Panhandles. Very windy into California, windy in the Columbia Basin here. And we've got we're just going to see a very colorful map here for a while. Our frost risk over the next 7 days looks something like this. So you can just read it. It's really well orchestrated here as to what the pattern's doing. Dip in that cold air, multiple troughs coming in here, ridging events that slide east with time, but still setting up over the southeast, helping to open up the Gulf moisture. Now on the temperature side of things, let's see if we can get this to reload. There we go. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow. Look at that cold air that's going to get wrapped into that cutoff low here. That's Thursday. These are high temperatures on Thursday here. Much warmer, of course. The West Coast getting a little bit of ridging in as well. There's Friday, very cold. This is what's supportive of that snow that's coming into this area. We then get into Saturday and Sunday and Monday. Now remember, early next week is when our next trough comes in, and it's going to dive down and make this same trajectory run like this as well. So we're looking at a very volatile temperature pattern. But what I wanted to take note of is that the day 5 through 10, and then out there day 10 through 15, we are seeing much better model results telling us that we should be expecting more, broad cold intrusions throughout the western mountains and throughout the Midwest. So these fronts are going to have a little more kick to them as we go forward. Now, speaking of going forward, I want to stretch this out pretty far here and just see what we can see. Because I noted that from the November 20th to December 20th, that would actually almost get us all the way to the winter solstice here. The models continue to put down much higher than normal pressure here. That's that Pacific Heights north of Hawaii. And what this is doing is this is forcing the jet to come into the United States like this and leave while we get some southeast ridging. In other words, the model is keeping going what we've currently had for a while. If we take a look at what that means for the late November through the first 3 weeks of December, this has still got more drought-busting rains hitting this region. It's also got a very active pattern for the Northwest. You can see where the high-pressure cells are going to be sitting. That's where those drier spots are. So we got flow coming around, making the turn, and there's a lot that can be used to explain why this is, but I think it's a combination of 3 things. The MJO movement is what kind of got it started. It was the catalyst. then we can see that this is a very La Nina and a very negative PDO type setup, and I want to explain that to you in a few moments. First, though, I want to show you that the newest update from the Climate Prediction Center did show that this area through here, everywhere that you see this shading, so here, this is where we're expecting to see improvement in the drought situation. And this shade here is where drought removal is likely. So you see the Northwest, you see this whole region. Across the South, Cotton Belt, probably dry. Parts of the Sun Belt drier. Much of the Northern Plains still dealing with drought as these systems come through. But their new release of their week 3, week 4, which would be the second half of the month, really just shows you that deep western trough southeast ridge pattern, right? I mean, it's just, that's why it's warm here, cool there. And that's what's going to set things up to be very active across the West Coast and the Midwest, central United States. If there's an area that's got a risk for being drier, I'd say it's the southeast, but it's not dry. You saw just in the model forecast, we're bringing moisture into this area. I want to compare that to, again, the MJO movement, which this whole sweeping arc like this is, I think, what started getting this movement. What I want to know is, does the MJO really collapse back into null space, or does it pop back out into phase 4 or 5 and make another run at it? I think it's going to do that. I think it's going to come out here and keep going. My reasoning for that is that we've got two big things going on. We still have our La Nina. It's hovering right around, somewhere between a degree, 0.8 Celsius to a degree Celsius below normal. There have been trade wind surges that have happened. But if you've remembered, a lot of my forecast videos have been focusing on this and its influence on the Pacific high. Can you see how it's opened up? All that warm water was here, and now we're starting to push it. It's like edging its way north of Hawaii. And while that's happened, these deep lows have turned up some cold water. And we're starting to see this kind of signal here. Do you notice that there's cooler water showing up here? There's cooler water here. We have our La Nina. There's cool water along the west coast of South America. And while this is hanging on as one warm spot, all it takes is a week or two of deep troughs to change this up. And that's a part of a pattern. Whenever you have warm water here, it's a pressure pattern as well, and cool water in this area, kind of following this arrow, we call this the negative phases of the Pacific decadal oscillation. Now, the water temperature is a reflection of that. But I want to show you the historical time series of this. Now, again, it's a decadal oscillation, so you can kind of see there's kind of 5 years down, 5 years up, 5 years down. That's how it just goes over time. If we zoom in here at the very end, what you'll notice is that we've been in, since 2019 into 2021, 2022, 23, 24, we've been in this negative PDO situation. In fact, right now it's the strongest it's been in over a decade. And if you just think about what that could mean going forward, we can look at this several different ways. Let's take the entirety of the North American cold season, which would be November to March. What it typically does here, if you just take a look at the correlation on temperatures, pushes that warm Pacific blob here, high pressure lives over that, and we just get this highly variable jet running over the top of it. We tend to be warmer than average across the south while we get these cold intrusions from the north. Does that narrative sound familiar? That's what we've been talking about as a winter outlook for a while. This means volatile weather patterns for the west coast. Out of the northwest, though, this is not the setup to deliver big subtropical jet stream flow. That's what the temperature pattern does. On the precip side of it, now this coloring is for precip, this is the area that shows up drier. And the reason for that, I drew my D backwards there, but whatever. You get flow that comes over the top and dives into these areas. So you tend to be wetter in the Midwest, wetter in the Ohio Valley, wetter around the Great Lakes, wetter into the Northeast. There tends to be drier risks in the plains, drier across the Southwest. And that looks very similar to what we've been talking about for a while with this La Nina. And that's because historically, if I can go find it again, negative PDOs link up with La Ninas. They've done that a lot in the past. So when we think about all this, we're going to get new long-range data tonight from the European model. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. But I imagine it's going to look a lot like this for November to March. That's the global correlation map. And since we've already talked about North America, let's talk about South America, where there's risk of being dry in this area while normal conditions persist here. Certainly, we know that the rains that have come lately have pushed the planting pace back up to their historical averages in Mato Grosso, as you can see here. Remember, a year ago, we were in the throes of a drought that lasted from the end of October through the end of December. It rained again in January, but that's why the planting pace fell off a year ago. But basically, we caught up. Now, this means that a lot of the crop was planted inside of a 2-week window, and that's going to be important to monitor as we go forward. But if we look kind of just globally at the way things are shaping up, you can find the troughs, can't you? There's one here, one here, one here, one here, and the ridges are in between, like the big one over Europe. But in South America, this is more of a monsoonally driven pattern. If we just kind of zoom in there a bit closer, still heavy rains through parts of Mato Grosso, getting over toward Goiás, Tocantins, even down towards Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais, these areas getting a lot of rainfall. We have a drier signal that extends from southern Brazil down into parts of Argentina. And Argentina is going to be on my watch list for a while, simply because there is risk November to March of being drier, developing drought in this area. Now, right now, the new longer range, which takes us out again, November 20th to December 20th, keeps this region wetter. There it is. We're still seeing that pattern. See these Ds I'm putting on here? I think that's something we're going to have to watch carefully. Wet in the middle, drier on the edges. So I'll keep you up to date, and thank you for your patience this morning with the late upload. It's pretty early here still over in Portland, but slow internet is going to cost me some delays today. So I will talk to you soon, tomorrow morning from Idaho. So have a good one. Thanks.